All right. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. So without further ado, we're going to introduce you to the man who needs no introduction, Mr. Michael Z Williamson. Can you tell the audience who live under a rock and don't know who you are a little bit about yourself?
I thought you said I need no introduction.
Well, there are people that live under rocks, so we're trying to help them out, bring them into the light.
Don't judge me for living under a rock. Mike Williamson. I was born in the UK. My father's Scottish, my mother's English. I joke that they got married, so I'm Scottish. Was raised there, raised in Canada, moved to the US as a teenager, enlisted in the US Air Force. I served in the Air Force, Army Guard, Air Guard, Army Guard again, 25 years. Basically, when everyone had a promotion slot, I changed branches. I'm editor-at-large for Survival Blog on anything disaster-related. I write science fiction, military fiction, occasional fantasy, product reviews. People send me stuff to destroy and test and have fun with. And got into editing anthologies based in my universe that allowed me to work with some amazing writers. And I've got a stack of work I've got to get done, including 5 novels. I think I got a short story in there somewhere on contract. I have to look at the sheet.
Okay, and the next part of the introduction, dear listener and viewer, is how we found them. So I actually found him through his book A Long Time Until Now, which was a temporal displacement series, book 1. I have it on good authority, book 2 is coming. And that's how I found him, was through that book. And then followed him because I wanted to harass him to see if book 2 was coming out. And the rest, as they say, is history. What about you, Doc? What bar and what con? What bar and what con did you meet him at?
I actually was familiar with his work because I'm sure this will surprise absolutely no one, but I grew up with a lot of Bane books in my house. So several of his books were in the house, so I knew the name. Then I met him at LibertyCon. I think the first thing I have read by you was in the Black Tide Rising anthology, your short story in that about the crazy uncle who kept coming up with guns out of crazy odd places. Or grandfather.
The crazy grandpa, yeah.
Yeah.
The crazy grandpa. Yeah.
So we're in the South. Everybody's got one.
I'd actually struggled with that. I wanted to do a story for the anthology. It's like, well, what story do I do? And I'd had this bit in the back of my mind for a long time that percolated to the top. And it's the crazy grandpa going, if it weren't for you whippersnappers, I'd be ready for this problem. But no, you had to be all rational. And like, oh yeah, that guy. And the story went from there.
Yeah, it was. I particularly enjoyed it. It was the funniest of the books of the short stories in that rather grim at points anthology.
I tried to have fun with it. The same with the second one. With they specifically asked me for Voices of the Fall. It was about all the little radio snippets they get, and they contacted me and said, "So you're going to do the King of Floor Cubitamp?" And it's this guy screaming into the microphone of a shortwave, "I am the King of Floor Cubitamp!" Like, so either this guy's in his basement, stoned out of his skull, about to be eaten by zombies, in which case there's no story, or this guy really is the king of Floor Cubitamp.
So,
all right.
But yeah, other than that, we met at LibertyCon in person. So
I'm sure, yeah. And then
So you've talked about briefly some of the stories that you're known for. Does your website, because we're going to list that in the show notes, does it have like a reading list or a reading order so people can follow it? Perfect.
Yes.
So if you were interested in all that, you'll find that list on his website, which will be in the show notes, and we'll talk about it at the end. All right.
The Amazon listing of books is horrible. They have book 8, book 10. It's like, no, they're not. So.
Yeah, Doc and I were talking about that. It's like some of the newer stuff from TradPub. It's like, no, organize it so I can find it.
And we keep sending them corrections, and it goes nowhere. So.
That's because you actually publish through other people than just Amazon.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's what happens when you're a grown-up. Okay.
Ouch, Doc. Ouch.
I love you. Now on to religion. I'm sure your favorite topic. Stargate, Lost in Space, or Battlestar Galactica?
So I don't have TV, and I haven't had TV for a long time. The original Lost in Space, campy, but it had its place. I don't know if they ever did a remake. Battlestar Galactica, the original.
They did a
different
remake.
type of campy. Okay, I saw the movie. The original Battlestar Galactica was campy in its own way, but it had lots of exploding spaceships, which is always a plus. And even when I was young at the time, I was 13. I recognized that the physics were. This was just fighter pilots in space, so the physics were ridiculous. I've seen a few episodes of the reimagining. It seems to have better grasp of politics and human interaction. And Stargate, so I know the author they ripped off to make that universe. Unfortunately, no longer with us. The movie was very pretty. It worked within itself. I've seen a few of the episodes. I like the fact that their away team has deadly weapons and a probe and doesn't rely on hippie PC catchphrases, double knit polyester, and stun. Yeah. Let's send the probe in first, see what happens. And the military officer does his job. He wants to blow everything up. And the scientist's job is to go, well, wait, let me look at it first. I mean, that's actually a good division of power there.
So the Lost in Space, they did a remake. They did the movie. Then they did a Netflix special. And I think there was a second movie that came out as well. The Netflix special was pretty good. They did some twists to it because, modern times are modern times, but it still came off really well.
The only thing I didn't like about the movie is I could tell each segment was done by a different studio because they contracted all that out for the effects, and it was obvious that each setting was a different product.
Ooh.
I wasn't even thinking to look for that, but that's good to know. So, what was the original Stargate inspired by? We'll say
a game called Fringeworthy. If you remember that,
a video game or
no, it was a role-playing game.
Okay, I'll have to look that up.
They even copied some of the character names and some of the devices. And
I'll have to look that up. Okay.
Yeah. Apparently, he got word that they were doing this, and someone had said, "Oh, well, they're out of business anyway, so it doesn't matter." When he wasn't out of business, he tried to sue. They offered him a settlement, and he unfortunately tried to sue, and their lawyers are bigger. So
I did not know that. Yeah. I'm a huge Stargate fan too, so I'll have to check that game out. Is it still in production? Do you know?
I doubt it. He's dead now. He's been dead for several years now, and he was basically a one-man shop after the WotC fallout, where they bought every game in the world.
Okay. Well, I'll have to check that out and see what I can find on the interwebs. All right, Doc, you got one more religion question to see if he gets to stay.
I do, because we are polytheistic. So, fantasy religion now. Forgotten Realms, Game of Thrones, or the Sword of Truth series. These are all books.
I have no idea about any of them.
What? I grew up reading the Sword of Truth.
I've heard of the first two.
Okay, so
I've seen a couple of excerpts. Nope.
Who's your favorite fantasy author then?
Boy, that's going to be awkward.
Why? Are you going to say Anne McCaffrey?
I mean, she could be a good fantasy author.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Okay.
I've seen a couple of bits of fight sequences from Game of Thrones on YouTube. I had friends go, "So you've got a military background. How logical is it?" I mean, it's not. That is such crap. And the comments are full of, "Well, it's a fantasy world." Like that doesn't change how cavalry work and how infantry work, and this is crap.
Doesn't change. Unless your magic is about beating physics, it doesn't change physics.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Angry Staff Officer podcast did a hilarious breakdown of everything that was wrong with the strategy of that series.
Now, I mean, the cavalry charge downhill in was that the Two Towers? That was Return. No, that was Return of the King. Infeasible, but boy, did it look awesome. A dramatic license.
And sometimes you got to do that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, any martial arts movie violates the laws of physics, but if it's done entertainingly, you know.
We forgive it if it's entertaining. Well, I guess we were going to ask you what your first love was, sci-fi or fantasy, but I'm guessing you're going to say sci-fi.
Yeah, I was in junior high school. A friend of mine was reading the Heinlein Juveniles out of the school library and handed me Have Space That Will Travel, because it had some equations about acceleration, gravity, things like that. And I understood enough to explain how you'd plug numbers in to get results of this. And I went ahead and read the book, and I read all the rest of the books, and then I read some Lester Del Rey, what's his name, White, who wrote John Christopher, The White Mountains, which was an interesting series. Some other stuff, Asimov's Mysteries, other Asimov. Quite a bunch. I went through every sci-fi book the school library had, and I started writing at that point. And of course, it was what you'd expect from a 15-year-old, so 13, 14-year-old.
So, did you get into Philip K. Dick when you were reading the early stuff?
I read a little bit of Dick. Some of it I really connect with. Some of it is like, this is just weird. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Doc, be mature. Be mature. You can do this.
I'm fine.
All right. Next question.
So would you say that was your first memory of interacting with the speculative fiction genre?
Well, I mean, I'd seen Star Trek even in the UK growing up, and some other movies. And I always liked, the sci-fi type of stuff.
Okay.
I'm just barely old enough to remember Apollo 11, and we got a TV for the purpose. We didn't have a TV. We got a TV for the purpose, and I was a year and a half old and a bit. And my question was, why are there deep sea divers on the moon? Well, it looked like to me. And then a few months later, we actually saw the Super Bowl, and my question was, why are astronauts playing rugby?
Okay.
All the padding.
So,
rugby players don't wear that. They wear shin guards and cup.
Yep. I understand. So, because you mentioned that you're part British, I have to ask these two important questions. One, what temperature do you drink your beer at? Cold, or are you one of those weirdos who drinks it warm?
So warm for British beer is actually like 55 degrees. It's cellar temperature, and it depends on the beer. Some beers work well at that temperature. Most lagers, most American beers actually work better cold.
Okay.
There's some Germans who actually put their beers on the radiator before lunch, so they have a warm, actual hot beer to drink. Ugh.
Wait, you said 55 degrees Celsius?
Fahrenheit.
Okay, Fahrenheit. Good, because I was like, that's boiling.
Cellar temperature.
Look at you and your science.
Yeah.
That would be 12 and change Celsius. So you and your science. Would you like me to convert it now to Kelvin?
No.
Jared goes, I don't even know what Kelvin is.
I remember vaguely from my Betty Crocker science classes.
I believe it starts at minus 458 Fahrenheit. Which is minus 230 Celsius.
So do you drink hot tea at noon to honor the Queen? Do you drink your hot tea at noon?
We drink tea all the time in the UK and in Canada. I'm too lazy to make my own most of the time, but I do enjoy it on occasion. And I've got nice tea here right now, which is anathema to the South. It's just 1/4 sweet and the rest of it's unsweet.
Oh, good God. You're never allowed back in Georgia at that rate. You just admitted heresy.
He is.
Well, my wife can't drink the sugar anyway, so she has hers completely unsweet, and I like.
We allow medical exemptions, and he's a Yank, anyways.
I'm a limey. Right. Well, actually, no, I'm a sheepshagger. Something.
He's not Southern, so he can keep his...
all of
it. So, what is it that you love about the speculative fiction genre?
You get to create a different background, a different universe, a different setting, and you put people into it and see how they would deal with it. Human beings are very adaptable, very flexible. But ultimately, any good story is people in one way or another, characters, whether human or not. how are they going to react to certain things, respond? What will they do to conquer it, work with it, work around it?
Okay. So, how did your love of the speculative fiction genre transition into you writing stories in it? At one point in time, you said when you were a young kid, that's when you started. But what was it that made you say, reading this is cool, but I want to write my
I can quit anytime I want to.
own?
I started writing when I was 8. It was about rockets at the time. I was doing pictures of how pumps, tanks, and everything else from what I'd studied in other books. By the time I got to high school, I was doing engine compression, thermodynamics for hot rodding cars.
So it just sort of came naturally for you?
Yeah.
Product of a curious mind. We'll take that.
Yeah.
All right. So many authors let their own real world experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments for you that really shaped you as a storyteller?
I'm sure there are, but I mean, being in the military for 25 years, there was all kinds of stuff. One of the I have no criticism of David Weber. He's a great writer. I love reading his stuff. I've got most of his books here. Most of the ones I've got here, I've read. There's still some on the waiting list. And same with Tom Clancy. But in both cases, the universes are a little too clean. They comply with the numerative.
Mystique?
No, with the numerative and statistical probabilities of things. And of course, David did a lot of gaming. Stuff just breaks down for no reason whatsoever in the military.
There is a reason.
There is a reason.
Lowest bidder.
The reason makes no sense. Yeah.
Lowest bidder, and the gods hate us.
We'd borrowed, this was in the 80s, and this was an early Hummer. This was before they were just becoming present. Jeeps were still the standard thing, which went away. And we borrowed a Hummer from another unit to use as our entry control point position because we didn't have a fixed guard point. And it was 35 below zero. We're not sending people out there for 8 hours to stand in 35 below zero if there's an alternative. I mean, if you have to, you have to. So we're in this Hummer, and this is our watch position, and we rotate going outside to check incoming vehicles. And there's a big sign on the steering wheel that says, "Do not shut off engine, starter broken." Doesn't get simpler than that, right? Very simple. Do not shut off engine, starter broken. And the Hummer has heat when you're not moving, unlike the Jeep, which requires you to be moving and have all the plastic on it. And at some point, it got too hot, so I turned the engine off. Did you see the sign that said not to turn the engine off? Well, yeah. So why'd you turn the engine off?
Was his name Carl?
Stuff like this happens all the time. I was doing after I retired, I was doing a training exercise with the Army down at Fort Knox, and I got handed this beautiful 1963 Tula Arsenal AK-47, and we're using simunitions, wax pellets in bullets, and wearing a mask. And I'm in a completely dark environment. They're going through the facility. I'm supposed to attack them at some point. And I pull the trigger on my AK and nothing happens. This is blasphemous to AK fanboys. How dare the AK have... So I cycle the action, nothing happens. Pull the magazine, cycle the action, bang it, close it back up, cycle again, nothing happens. The AK that never jams had double fed 2 rounds, and because I couldn't see, I couldn't get I couldn't unjam it, and I got shot. Luckily, there's simunitions. But stuff that it's horribly reliable. It never has a problem. Yeah, BS. So, is this a swearing friendly show or not?
Yeah, you can find. You swear.
Okay, I'll minimize it. But yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you haven't topped Casey yet.
Oh no, it's hard to do. Or my wife. Or my ex-wife, who, when she went in the military, suddenly developed a huge reduction in vocabulary. But so stuff breaks for no reason whatsoever. And a lot of people who weren't in the military, that doesn't reflect well in their fiction. They're like, okay, so right here, this is going to break. Why? Because it does. There's no reason. There's no rationale here. It's broken.
See, what I always got told was, why? It doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It only matters if it's broken or if it's not.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And sometimes you can fix it with a hammer. And whether or not you can fix it with a hammer, engineers and infantry are going to try to fix it with a hammer. I've watched an engineer officer, when we were putting a K-span building together in, this would have been in 99 in Kuwait for Operation Southern Watch. And we're building a K-span to put equipment in. And it's a Quonset hut. It's arches with a central support. And it hadn't quite lined up. So rather than unbolt everything, adjust it, and tighten it back down, he just climbs up the ladder with a sledgehammer and starts beating on it. And I'm watching metal deform. It's like, sir, do you have any idea of the mass ratio and the tension on those bolts? You just shut up and go over there. Like, all right. And he's just sitting there beating away with a hammer. And not only did he not fix it, he broke it, so that they had to replace it. And this was an officer with an engineering degree. So.
All right.
And that's the way I always summarize it. If you give a squad of infantrymen 3 anvils at 0900, by noon, 1 anvil will be lost, 1 will be broken in 3 pieces, and 1 will be pregnant.
Yeah.
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 I had a colonel who insisted on my NCO and I were both women, and he insisted on bringing bottled water in. And he looks at us and he's like, "You're only allowed to drink the bottled water." And why, sir? And he goes, "Because that shit is in the water, and I don't have time for either of you to be pregnant." And I looked at her as he goes into his office, and I went, "I know he doesn't have any kids, but do you think he understands how that happens?" And I hear from the office, "Shut up, Small. Nobody cares about what the medic thinks." I will admit, after he left, we had a change of command. And within 2 months, the bottled water was all gone, and I was pregnant.
Well, there you go. You should have listened.
Apparently, it was in the water. Who knew?
And the most important phrase in the military: "It was like that when we got it."
Sorry, Colonel Swift. I stopped drinking bottled water.
Did you call him up and apologize that he was right, tell him you were right?
Hell no, I didn't. I knew better. You don't tell an infantry officer that they were right.
One of the little things that's going to get worked in at some point. I was Army Guard down here. It was forward headquarters for a forward support battalion, and the captain comes in to the motor pool and is like, "Sergeant Smith, yes sir. I just signed some paperwork for Sergeant Floyd. Yes sir. What was it?" It's like, "Oh, that's going in a book."
That's awesome. Not for him,
Not here,
but
please,
it's
sir.
awesome.
Okay. What did I just sign for?
Since we're talking about the military, your bio mentions, and you just talked about you served in both the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force. So we ask all authors who were military veterans this question, but how do you feel like, other than stuff breaking for no reason, how do you feel like your time in the military affects the stories you tell?
I didn't get to do much travel. I was mostly stuck in cornfields and sandboxes. But you get to meet people, and it's amazing in some of these very technical fields. There's people who are dumber than hammers, bags of hammers, and in fields where engineers, "Oh, you guys just dig ditches." Well, no, actually, my training included thermodynamics. But you get people who are ridiculously brilliant and have multiple skill sets, and that showed up. You said you read A Long Time Until Now. It's 10 troops from 3 branches, active, guard, and reserve, and they've got a huge cross-section of civilian experience and professional training. And quite a few civilians in the comments said it's ridiculous to think that a bunch of grunts would have this level number of skill sets. And all the veterans are going, "No, that sounds like a pretty typical unit."
Well, they weren't all grunts either.
Right. I gave a couple of kickers, and spoiler for the second novel, there's another element that doesn't have that breadth of skill set, and they don't do nearly as well.
Do we get to see more Romans?
Book 3, there should be more Romans.
JR just has a hard on for Romans.
He's one of the few who gets it right. Most people that write Romans, they write them too clean and too nice. Yes, they had an empire. Yes, they are interesting. Yes, I like reading them. They weren't nice people, especially if you were on the other side of the sword.
Well, we know you don't like nice people because you like me.
This is true.
Well, it's just like the Viking era, which is something I'm very interested in. Yes, the Vikings were violent scumbags a lot of the time, but so was everybody else. They weren't unique in that. That was the era they lived in. So, human sacrifice, slaughtering people, both the Roman era and the Viking and everything in between. This was how society operated. The noble savage myth doesn't apply to anyone we've ever encountered. Yeah. Of any savagery or sophistication. They're all violent, inquisitive societies, or they didn't survive.
So from a size perspective, the Vikings really were actually a little bit larger. They speculate that the curative properties in honey, because of all the mead they drank, kept them healthier than their counterparts when they encountered them in Great Britain.
They also had a diet very heavy in fish and meat. They had a lot of protein.
So they were healthier.
My family is Williamson is a sept of Clan Gun on the northeast coast of Scotland, named after Gunnar, who was a Norse settler. His sons were William and Henry. My side's Williamson, and my grandmother's side is Henderson. So there's 1,000 years of Viking ancestry in that part of Scotland, and we're all 4 to 6 inches taller than the average Brit. It's still
Brits must be really short.
It's all that warm beer.
When I was growing up, the average British male was like 5'8". Wow. The average American was 5'10". Now I'm over 6 foot. My father's over 6 foot. My mother's 5'9". My sister's 5'10". And when we went back on vacation when I was 15, my grandmother was worried that the punks at the gaming halls would beat me up, and I was a head taller than them. So because they were Southern Brits.
So you mentioned briefly that the idea of the what did I just sign for went in a book, but generally speaking, do you draw from people you knew when you were in the military?
Yeah, but I composite characters. I don't just pick a person and that's them. Because 1, that's boring, and 2, it's cheating, and 3, it's unkind. And 4, how well do you actually know someone? If you look at a Red Dwarf, Rimmer is a holographic reconstruction of what Lister thinks his roommate was like, and Lister's pretty narcissistic, so the character is only a shadow of what the real one would have been, and they play it very well. How well do you actually know someone? And often when I'm writing a character, it's like, well, obviously this character is going to be motivated by this. And characters I wanted to hate, it's like, well, I still don't like him, but I kind of understand where he's coming from in his context.
Okay, so we've talked about how your time in the service affects the stories you tell, but does it affect the kind of stories you engage with as a reader?
Yes. I can enjoy military fiction that's written by civilians, but I can tell it was written by civilians. Military fiction written by veterans. It's like, yeah, I think this looks familiar.
Okay. Well, now we get to ask the all-important fandom question. So, Doc, you got this lined up, I'm sure. Try to control yourself.
I do. So, have you had any cool fan art or cosplays of any of your work?
Yes. Actually, right after Freehold came out, someone got the license plate to Freehold and sent me a photo of it. That was kind of cool. Neat. And a friend of mine did Angie Kaneshiro at DragonCon last time.
19.
Flight suit, space coveralls, wrench, badge, backpack of accessories. I had several people doing Ripple Creek security one year. They escorted me to the Bain slideshow. and my interpretation of Gecko 45, who was an online character who I actually know personally, but I parodied him in the book there, and so a friend of mine did Gecko 45 complete to the uniform saying security and the balaclava and lots of hardware. And then our girlfriend Alice did one of the operatives out of Contact with Chaos. So she's very physically fit. So she could get away with grass skirts, boots, a flint spear, a shield, and some paint.
Even if you can pull that off, it still takes a lot of guts.
So that was so I had this whole escort of various goons accompanying me around the to panels. That was kind of neat.
I hope you got a lot of pictures for your website.
Yeah, I should probably put more pictures on I have to have my wife do that. I'm technically illiterate as far as stuff like that goes. So
that cosplay
when I get a
kind of
chance, I'll
thing
give it
is,
to her.
the cosplay is kind of one of those things that sort of is like a snowball. You start inspiring people, and someone will say, "Oh, that looks cool. Not quite how I pictured it. Let me do something different." It's one of those things where
and I've had people send me fan art of some of the spacecraft and aircraft and such.
Cool.
There's hypothetically a Ripple Creek game in slow development. Whenever I get a chance, because I don't do much with gaming, so when I get a chance to talk to the person in question, it's coming along slowly. And unrelated to my stuff, but for this Dragon Con, we're trying to get my daughter dressed up as a pea shooter from Plants vs. Zombies.
That'd be cool.
That,
she doesn't play the game.
Would be absolutely adorable.
She loves watching the game, so.
I don't understand this phenomenon of people watching other people play. Just play the damn game yourself.
Well, she's
to be honest,
not yet 7,
given the
so.
age of the little one, I understand because I've seen the age of the little one.
But yeah, watching my teenage son watch people's gameplays, it's like, why are you watching this? I mean, if you were actually studying it for tactics before you did something, that would make sense, but you're not. So.
Yeah, I understand that one. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I find it boring, and I end up falling asleep.
Maybe that's why they're tired and they can't fall asleep.
No, I'd step outside and his screen would be flickering at like 3 a.m. Like, you falling asleep in school? It's like, yeah, because you won't sleep, dumbass.
Stupid logic. So
it's actually kind of boggling because I would get up every night at midnight and sneak out over the garage roof and down the tree. My mother never knew that. And out till 6 a.m. and get back for school for 7. And I managed to stay awake, but and it had no lasting side effects.
So has anybody ever asked you for your autograph away from a convention or a book tour?
Yes, actually, I was on my way to a convention in Germany. I'm in the Indianapolis airport, and someone walking by was, Mr. Williamson. So that's happened a couple of times.
That's kind of cool.
It is. It's also a little like I'm not really that big a deal. I write books. Yeah. And away from a convention. I mean, we should. The gun show here is basically a convention. It's just a convention for gun nerds. So I sell books and get autographs there.
That's awesome. So, have you spotted your book in the wild? Like somebody else reading it just randomly?
Actually, last time I was deployed, the base library had several of my books when I got there. It's like, well, that's kind of cool.
That's funny.
And the chapel had a couple, and but as far as seeing someone read, I don't actually see people read very often. I'm sure there's people out there with their phones or tablets or whatever who are reading something. But
so what is your weirdest or funniest fan interaction?
Hold on. So were you deployed after you were already published?
Oh yeah. I my first sale was in 2002, my first sci-fi sale, 2002, published in 2004, and I didn't retire till 2010. That's my very carefully, my Amazon bio says I'm a veteran, It says 18-year veteran, 20-year veteran, 22-year veteran. You can draw the connections there. Jamie Ibsen, who writes in my universe, it says he worked in Canadian law enforcement because he's not allowed to say he's a Mountie. He's retired now. Now he can say he was a Mountie, but the RCMP does not like anyone, mixing that reference with any other line of work whatsoever.
So did that make extra security concerns for you, or did you just keep it pretty secret and nobody really knew?
I told public affairs, and they said, yeah, that's fine as long as you identify yourself as a veteran. It doesn't affect us. Chris Denote, who's about to retire, is a colonel, intelligence branch, and he has to clear all his stories through public affairs, who consults with relevant agencies before they're published, as a matter of course.
That's got to be both aggravating, but also if you're really into sci-fi and you're reading it, kind of fun.
And more than once I've done a blog post, press return, it posts, and 2 minutes later my phone rings, and it's one of a couple of friends. Mike, where did you hear about such and such? Apparently, sometimes the stuff is still hypothetically classified. Well, I was never read into it, so it's not my classification. It's nothing I need to worry about. I got it from public sources, and that happened to me once. Once on the Army side, someone said, "Sergeant Williamson, you were in the Air Force. What do you know about X?" Like, so that wasn't something I ever dealt with, so I really couldn't. Anything. And we won't discuss what it actually was or what I know about it, but it's like,
all right. Well, so we don't give out.
It was yeah, go ahead. I can ramble.
I was going to say, since we don't want to give classified information, I'll repeat the question Doc asked, but we got distracted on. So any weird or funny interactions? I'm sorry, I go down rabbit trails, Doc. So just bear with me.
Sure,
any weird or funny interactions with fans?
Weird or funny interaction? Weird happens not irregularly. We're good friends now, but for a while I had my biggest fan, and it's very weird to have a biggest fan. And came along with us to a couple of events, and met us at a couple of events, and we're all out for dinner at some random diner. Like, do you know who this guy is? Like, shut up, they don't care. It doesn't matter. Holding up one of my books, like it doesn't matter. And he'd apparently he'd sent a fan letter to somebody and got basically back just a form letter when he was young, and really irritated him. So he said, so I just send thank you cards. And I write, so those random envelopes I get with a business card in them that says thank you, is that you? Yeah, it's really fucking creepy to have an envelope show up at the house with a business card in it that just says thank you. You could write on the back for writing such and such, and it would be fine. Okay, but a random card just show. It never occurred to him. It just happened. He says, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry." Like, yeah, that's fine. And since we know each other, you can actually talk to me. Yeah, so stop doing that crap.
I think I know who that is.
Like, that was the first time. It's like, okay, what's this? And then the second time, it's an envelope. I opened it up, and it just thank you, and it's literally a business card. It says thank you on it. And on the back is nothing. It's like, okay. And the third time, it's like, do I need to contact someone to? So yeah, if you're the kind of person who does this, just write on the back for writing such and such, for starring in such and such, for your paper on such anything. So I have a contact.
Fair enough. All right, so now we're going to talk about why we brought you here. So today we're going to be introducing the Freehold universe and the anthologies of short stories set therein. So we decided after we interviewed Jamie Denote and Chris Denote about their stories in the Freehold Defiance anthology, that why not get the creator of the universe? And so here you are.
What an idea!
I know. I'm creative that way. They pay me the big bucks for this on that podcast. So I'm going to read you the. Yeah, you didn't get paid? You're not getting your paycheck?
Is that what the liquor you sent me was for?
Absolutely. You
Oh,
get paid in booze. Just don't make me apologize to your liver because it's probably working overtime. So, in case you don't remember those two short interviews we did a couple weeks back, I'm going to read you the blurb for Freehold Defiance. So, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. Everyone has a different war. For some in the UN peacekeeping mission to Granier, the struggle is just to survive. For others, it's to remain sane or keep one's friends and comrades physically and mentally intact. When the rules of engagement are in constant flux and orders are unclear or based on false information, just getting back inside the fence can be an accomplishment. For the rebels of the Freehold of Grania, they must form an organized force from the shattered remnants of their military and from grimly determined and under-equipped and outnumbered insurgents. Their war is for their life, for their very way of life. They'll do everything and anything to stop the invasion using whatever means are available. They mean to make the enemy suffer. And then it's got some Latin stuff I can't pronounce, and because physical wounds heal. And this is why I am not a book narrator, obviously. So,
you suck.
So what you're telling me is I'm fired.
No, because I'm not doing it.
All right. So before we dig in, we're going to take a moment to look at your cover. Let me pull that up. We'll do that real quick. So what's the story behind this piece of art? Because most of your art it stands out in some of what other TradPub authors are doing.
Mm-hmm. So sometimes the cover's been a struggle. Bain has the artist talk to the author and at least attempt to read it, depending on time frame and schedule, before they do the cover. And usually that's fantastic. A couple times there's been some miscommunication. And part of that's on me because I have no artistic talent whatsoever as far as flat art goes. I'm not bad at carving. I'm pretty good at metal work, but flat art is, I can appreciate it and comprehend it, but I don't do it. But this is the first story out of the anthology. This is Jamie Ibsen's, where there's a bridge on fire, and the bridge has been set on fire, and the UN wants the fire put out. And since this is a laissez-faire society, the fire department is all contract, and they're going, well, we don't have a contract with you. You took over. You need to either sign a contract or bring your people in. We're not going to risk our equipment putting out your government's problem. Fun little subplot of that story. And then on the ground is just some random insurgents and UN vehicles, because the whole beginning of it is stuff getting blown up. UN starts landing in spaceport and one of the cities, and everyone who recognizes what's going on starts throwing stuff at them between rocks, bullets, remote controlled vehicles, anything to make the day bad.
Yeah.
And,
so much fun.
Yeah.
But, so what is your title in the story? What's your story?
So I've got several in here. I did a reprint of The Humans Call It Duty, which is one of the military leopards' point of view, how the leopard sees the battle. I've got They Also Serve, which is about a couple of veterans doing reconnaissance of a UN convoy route and eventually setting up an ambush, both to damage the convoy and to acquire resources. I've got Bidding War, which is about the future version of Ripple Creek Security out of a different sub part of the universe I do, who are going, so we get paid to do security and paramilitary work and no one's hiring right now. And we really don't want to take a job for the people who are occupying our home planet, because that will piss off our neighbors. So what are we going to do for money? And this ties in with the one Larry Correa did for the previous one with the Professional Duelists Association. One of the ways, if you don't like the court's decision, you can decide to have a duel. So there are a small number of professional duelists whose job is to face off and, calling a spade, they're the Assassins Guild. And in the previous collection, the occupying bureaucracy tells them, we're not going to allow that anymore. That's uncivilized. So you've just unemployed the Professional Assassins Guild. What are they going to do for money? And you've unemployed the mercenaries who do security. and paramilitary, what are they going to do for money? You've just pissed off people who kill people for money. This was not a well thought out strategy. And then
It's
I've
like you
got
know things.
another reprint. Yeah, I know. Another reprint that I originally did for John Ringo's Citizens anthology in this universe, which is in the final big counter attack, and a lot of the battles in that were either flat out suicidal or had a high risk of being suicidal. It was a desperation push, which worked, but it's a point of view of one of the intel ships and the crew who've been told, whatever you can do, take this craft out, make their command ship go away.
So you actually have 3 stories in here?
4, I think. 1, 2, 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, oh my goodness, because I was going to ask, the Humans Call It Duty sounded really neat, and I was wondering what the inspiration for it was.
So, and when I first read the nonfiction behind this, it caused a couple of other reactions. I'm a fan of Peter Hathaway Capstick. He's an outdoor writer. He started as a stockbroker in New Jersey. He grew up hunting in New Jersey when there was rural terrain in New Jersey more than, and there still is, but became a stockbroker, hated being a stockbroker, became a professional hunter, first in Central America and then in Africa. And he would, lead people on hunting expeditions. And he's got a series of books about being a professional hunter. The first one is Death in the Long Grass. And you read this book and you realize that everything in Africa will turn you into protein. If it will not eat you, it will crush you up so that something else can eat you. It starts off talking about how he's sleeping in his cot, and hears a lion, and wakes up wearing just a loincloth and grabs his double rifle. And you keep a pair of bullets in the muzzle so that spiders don't lay eggs in the barrels of your gun and cause it to blow up. And goes out stalking and makes sure this lion leaves the camp. And in most of Africa, you can't just shoot a lion and say, "Oh, well, it was attacking us," unless there's actually blood on someone, because people have taken illegal trophies using that strategy. So you can't just So made sure the lion left, came back into his tent, and realized that the lion's footprints went right through his tent. It had walked right next to his cot, and cracks the gun open to change cartridges, which you do all day long in the heat, but you do it as a matter of habit, and realize that his gun was empty because one of the clients had helpfully unloaded his gun to make sure it was safe. And he was stalking a lion with a gun. They had a discussion over that. But he got onto leopards, and leopards are highly intelligent, problem-solving, very tricky, and will try to hunt you. If they realize there's a hunt on, they will try to hunt you back, as often as not. For a long time, there was this belief that leopards were endangered, and they're not endangered. You just can't see them. And they finally put trackers on some of them, and they're going, "Well, it's right in that bush right there." "What bush?" "That bush."
You know what? That's probably for the best.
You know what? You know what? This monitor says there's a leopard in that bush. Well, there's no leopard in that bush. They're really, really good. And one of the famous ones is the Rudraprayag leopard in India. And over the space of a year, it had 300 confirmed kills plus. And they don't know how many unconfirmed, because rural India is pretty remote. And this was a sociopathic, murderous leopard. It would follow kids home from school. The last kid in line disappears. Nobody hears or sees a thing, and the kid's gone. And then they find the body. It would kill chickens. It would kill goats. It would kill cows. It had an entire province hunting it. At one point, it was crossing a rope bridge, and Indian army element with a machine gun opened up and got nothing. They may have hit part of its tail. It was eating traveling pilgrims on their way to some event or other. And Colonel William Corbett, who's a renowned hunter, volunteered his services. And the penultimate engagement, because he'd go out and it would get dark and he'd miss a shot, and or he wouldn't see it or it would disappear. So the penultimate engagement, they set up, it's almost cartoonish. They set up a trap, spring trap, literally hair triggered to go off with a leaf, the way you see in the Looney Tunes cartoons, baited with a body of someone that had recently killed. The body was stuffed full of cyanide capsules. The body was wired to 3 set guns that were pointed at that point. They wanted this leopard dead, and he was hiding downwind in a blind with his rifle. The leopard showed up. The moon went behind a cloud. The leopard rolled the body over to take the tension off the wires. This is documented. Ate some chunks of the body, took off and set off the trap on the way out without getting caught. He fired off 1 round and missed in the dark. And I'm thinking at this point you declare the leopard the winner, because the next night he's coming back with lockpicks. So he shot at me last night. But I decided, leopards needed to be a thing in a military context, because they have better. They're not as tractable as, say, cheetahs, and they're not domesticated yet, the way dogs are. But they got a better sense of smell, better vision, and people hear a dog bark and they can always convince themselves that maybe that dog will be nice. And you hear a big cat go, and you realize it's going to eat your face. I mean, there's no nice kitty to something that weighs 150 pounds, is 5 foot long and has retractable claws. It's like, no, there's no nice kitty. And that story kept getting rejected by magazines. Like one of them even said they were a state-supported sci-fi magazine in Australia, partly due to the small market there, and partly because, well, if you need state support, you're obviously not profitable. But this is a simple tale of revenge and killing. Like, well, first of all, the character's not human, so that's not just a simple tale of revenge and killing, because it's a different motivation. But and then Jamie's done a couple of stories with the leopards because he really liked the concept. And, so that's how they came into the universe. Was there a point I was supposed to be getting to there, because I missed it?
No, we were asked for the inspiration for the short story.
Okay, yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit about your main character?
So when I first read that story, I had just finished reading one of the Man Kazin novels, The Colonel's Tiger, about one of the Kazin scout ships in Larry Niven's universe landing on Earth in the late 1800s, and humans hunting a Kazin who they called a Tiger Man because he was, bipedal and armed. And I just read this story and I'm going, yeah. So I sent a copy of the book to Larry, and he read that story, and he said it was a very creepy, disturbing tie-in.
All right. So since the leopard was the main story in that one, you answered that one. But were there any secondary characters in that short story, the Humans Call It Duty, that were memorable?
No, because his handler's dead. The leopard's handler is dead, and the leopard, does not have anyone to give him instructions. He understands he's got to broadcast a intel report from the radio on his harness every day, and otherwise he's going to kill all the people who killed his friend.
So would the bad guys be then the people that killed the friend, without giving too many spoilers?
Yeah, it's a UN patrol. It's a UN Special Operations Patrol, and they learn what a lot of other people have learned throughout history, that an angry leopard is a very disturbing enemy.
Okay, so this clearly fits into a larger universe. We've sort of hinted at that along the way. So in case people haven't read any of the Freehold books, can you give us the rundown on what this universe is?
Yeah, so the main universe novels is Freehold, The Weapon, and Angel Eyes, and they're all contemporaneous, different points of view, different elements of the war. Very little actual interaction between them, and they all stand alone. You can read any of these or the anthologies. Any of them is an independent story. Because I always hate when I pick up a book that looks interesting and it's like, so I have no idea what the background is here. So it's probably very hard to avoid that. It's in the future. There's multiple colonies. There's several that are UN member nations. some that are a colonial alliance where they're sort of waiting to join the UN, but they're still colony status. And there's at least 2 I've covered, possibly 3 or 4, where they're just independent. One of them, it's a case of it's the Govanum system, which I've referenced in Do Unto Others and in the previous anthology. It's basically privately owned, and the entire system is being mined for minerals. It's very mineral rich. And their attitude is, so if you want metals, you will just leave us alone and let us sell you metals. If you interfere with us, then it's going to affect business. When you hold the purse strings, you can do that. Freehold of Grania, it's a case with a lot of frontier and colonial societies. First, they develop their infrastructure, and then, so what are we going to do about bureaucracy? And they decide, well, do we really want or need a bureaucracy? I mean, it's just, we've got the technology, we've got the resources. Why do we need to have, supplemental coverage of all of this when we have a system that works? And the UN wants them to become a member, and they're like, we don't really see any reason or need to. I mean, we'll keep trading with you. That's fine. And they become a convenient scapegoat. If you go through history, there's lots of convenient scapegoats for starting wars. It's a running. You think at some point someone would learn that this never ends well, but they keep doing it. And so the UN invades, and because the bureaucrats and the politicians are running it, they want a physical presence to show their dominance. So they want to occupy the planet. Now, there's much better ways to fight a star system than trying to occupy the planet. Once you control transport coming in, you control the economy. But no, they have to have boots on the ground. And you may have seen this in multiple recent engagements. And so the end result is a really ugly war. If I do another anthology, it'll probably be more of the spacecraft battles and habitats, which have been done a little, but should be done in more depth, because both of these 2 are heavily placed on the surface.
Now, is it specifically only this planet called Freehold?
Grania, it's specifically that's the most Earth-like. That's the Earth-like planet in the system. There's others that are inhabited with habitats, and those are covered here and there. So
why is it called Freehold?
It's the Freehold of Grania. It's a freehold because it's independent.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. The term of art in real estate came from the UK, of property that is owned outside of the crown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm American. Totally missed me on that one. So.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was a freehold because you had read some of David Weber's stuff. Because that's the only other place I've heard that term.
Yeah. No, actually, this was before that.
That's Safehold. JR.
And ironically, William Dietz had a novel called Freehold, came out the same time mine did. Another writer.
Oops.
Yeah. It was titles are not a huge deal.
So that's why we have authors, right? To differentiate the titles.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All right, Doc. This one's on you. Are you feeling stabby yet? This question is appropriate for stabby feelings.
Oh, I will stab you. So if your characters found you in a back alley and knew who you were, how would that go down?
Well, that would depend on which character, for one.
How about your leopard?
Well, I mean, the leopard got to settle a score that he'd be unhappy at the handler dying. So, I mean, a author can't be too nice to their characters, or the story is boring. You know, the character who never has anything bad happen to them, like, what's the point? So,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Most people, authors at least, I don't think would do very well from all the crap they put their characters through.
But we get some creative authors were like,
and I have the problem that most of my characters could kick my ass. I mean, I'm in decent shape, but some of these people are techno ninjas.
So, do you have transhumanism in your universe then? Are they augmented, or is this just, you're writing about elite?
Minimal augmentation. Jamie added cybernetic enhancements for vision and hearing to the animal handlers, the leopard handlers, and some of the special operations people have a implant that gives them a squirt of into the bloodstream of additional sugars, oxygen, and minerals. So for a few moments, they're insanely fast and strong, more so than just their training.
Okay. All right, back to you, Doc.
So, since we've talked about characters, what is your favorite archetype of a character to use?
I don't know if I really have a favorite, because there's multiple. I prefer strong characters who try to control a situation rather than. I've read some very good stuff where the characters are basically dragged along by the tide of events, and I can enjoy reading it, but that's not the character I would want to be, and it's not what I like to write. With Angel Eyes, that character is. Angie's largely an observer. She's leading a special operations unit to places where they can do mayhem, but she herself is a former military medic. So she's got some basic combat training, some decent medical training, and she's been ship crew. And these people are fabricating explosives and decompressing habitats. And she watches one hand-to-hand engagement where one of the guys just literally breaks someone's spine, and it's like, this is not the type of thing that she was either trained for or has a background for. Yeah. So that was a little. Writing a observer character was a different task than writing an actor character.
So, I know this is a bit random, but what is the war over or about? Like,
how dare you be successful?
Okay.
which has happened before in history. In fact, there's an element there of the American War of Independence. One of the issues was the whole taxation without representation was a valid complaint. The complaint on the other side was because there weren't duties on a lot of the colonial products. Large numbers of the ships came over to the colonies to stock up on cannon and supplies. And the outfitters in England were not getting business. It was all going to the colonies. And they're like, well, why are they getting all our business? So,
because we're cute.
Well, I mean, it's something that should have been addressed early on in a peaceful, fashion, rather than just, well, shut up, you damn colonials, give us some money.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, American gun control goes back before there was in the U.S. And it didn't work then either.
No, but getting off of that one though, do you have any internally consistent rules of science or in technology that you do for the Freehold universe?
Well, it's pretty much our physics. There's two competing faster than light methods, which I don't go into detail on how they work because, well, I'm not a physicist and it doesn't really matter. But they have different parameters they operate in, and yeah, that's consistent in the stories. And that can be an issue on where someone is going to be or how they're going to get there. The last anthology covered that at length. The phase drive can operate anywhere, although it uses more energy and it's a more expensive process. But this means the surviving Freehold spacecraft can set up a remote base that is literally unreachable by UN craft because there's no jump point attached to it. Even if they knew it existed, they would have no way to get there. So they've got a minimal force, but they absolutely have a home free fort they can go to that's not reachable.
So do you use FTL, or is it just like Stargate type deal?
Oh yeah, yes. Well, they're getting where they're going faster than the speed of light. The process they're using, I haven't gone into, but one uses fixed points, and one uses equipment aboard the craft. So, but they're not necessarily traveling in space faster than light.
And are you using chemical propelled weapons or like lasers or what?
Chemical weapons, and comes up in one of the anthologies. Once because there's a big push for non-lethal weaponry, but once it gets to lethal weaponry, we're at the point now where modern body armor can stop most bullets. There's a polypropylene plate out now that's rated for rifle fire and is good for 8 or 10 hits. And we're not, and because there's physical limits on how fast you can push a bullet in atmosphere, we're rapid, or any projectile, even if you use magnetic impulse, atmospheric drag very quickly slows projectiles down. So we're rapidly reaching the point where body armor will stop bullets and fragmentation, the end. It won't stop concussion. There'll still be weak points, just like there was with plate armor, but it's going to have an effect on how wars are fought. One of the big issues in this universe is that for a long time there wasn't a lot of technical development because there wasn't an outside enemy. Suppressing insurgents when you control the economy and the resources is a lot easier than fighting a heavily supplied enemy. And then both of these anthologies, it starts off with the Freehold military has been largely suppressed or destroyed. The insurgents have minimal supplies, but as things go on, they're actually building the infrastructure in the military to the point where they have an organized force with modern weapons.
So do you see a conclusion in this universe?
Do what?
Do you see a conclusion where you're gonna? Do you see a conclusion where, like, eventually war ends? If only for more
the war ends. Yeah, that's covered. Yeah, the war does end, and there's Contact with Chaos is written after the war, and Rogue is written after the war. These are both novels that follow up. Yeah, the war does end definitively.
Okay. So of all the tech that you have and you created in your universe, which would you want to have for daily use?
Out of that universe?
Yeah.
My own spaceship would be pretty cool.
Okay. So
let's start with that.
And like most military people that were enlisted, if you had such cool technology, you would use it and abuse it. So how would you mistreat this spaceship?
Well, I'd be going all over the galaxy trying to look at every neat astronomical thing there is. I mean, I'm sure there's things I could blow up, but I want to see that up close.
Okay. All right, Doc, you get to ask your second favorite question, or maybe it's your third. I don't know. We'll have to rank them someday.
No. They're all my favorite children. Okay, so are there any aliens in this universe?
Yes. Contact with Chaos, they encounter sentient non-humans who have a very different technological evolution because they're on a metal poor planet. The easiest metals to refine are iron, the red metals, copper, bronze, and alloys, and things like lead, and they do not have those readily accessible on the surface. So they develop an entire technology of ceramics, selective breeding, chemistry, without actually having metal. I had a lot of fun with that.
So how did you go about designing these aliens? Were they whole cloth, strange, weird nightmares?
No, just I just sat down and was like, so probably bipedal, so they have manipulative hands, probably binocular vision, and of course we may be entirely wrong on all this when we actually meet other aliens if we do, but there's certain things that even evolutionarily on Earth have repeated themselves because they work. The blood chemistry is different because iron is less available. They have a aluminum magnesium oxygen transfer process for their blood, and their environment they can manage ours. Theirs is eventually toxic to us. Long term, it's not healthy. Short term, it's not that huge of an issue, but it can become so. a lot of the plant growth is toxic, and I was looking at, what kind of technology can you do if you don't have metal? Well, you can't really have firearms, but you can have rockets and explosives.
Mm-hmm.
You can have balloons and drop bombs, which means you can still have airborne troops. Yeah, balloon carried airborne troops.
So are they friendly aliens, or are they like please don't phone home, just go home?
Well, yeah, as with any human societies, there's multiple nations and factions. Their communication is somewhat limited because they don't have, radio or phones. Now they have to rely on things like semaphore and light, but they have multiple nations and cultures. Some are very technically sophisticated, some less so. And the first one they encounter does a Pythagorean drawing in fire on the surface to indicate, so we're intelligent and we can see you up there. I'm not sure what you're doing, but we're aware you exist. And there's a landing, and there's meetings and discussions, and there's other nations who want to become involved and to see their factories, and then eventually one group decides they're going to get a little more hostile for the benefits of having control of the resources. So there's some alien on alien fighting and humans versus aliens.
Okay. So our quick interview about your anthology has clearly been anything but. It's been fun, though. But before we wrap this up, was there anything about the Freehold universe that we didn't ask that you wanted to tell us before we move on?
I think we've covered most of it. There's 3 main novels, 2 anthologies, a side anthology. The Ripple Creek stories are in the same universe but set beforehand. They all stand alone, so pick one up and read, and you won't be missing much, if anything, contextually. The characters are observers, actors. They're everything from refugees to special operators. I mean, there's room for everyone in the war. And then after the war, there's some recovery, some exploration, and beforehand. I certainly appreciate readers, and I have fun writing it.
So I forgot to ask earlier, but does this short story collection was military sci-fi, but is the rest of the books in the universe, are they all Mil SF?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the amount of military versus political content varies, but it's a war, so there's some of each, and they all have different things. The weapon is the most violent as far as sheer body count. Angel Eyes is more skulking around, clandestine, and then the anthologies, the stories vary between people who are just trying to survive and get along to people who are actively trying to put a hurt on the other side.
Okay. And what is it specifically about military sci-fi that appeals to you?
I mean, growing up young, I watched a lot of exploding spaceships. So I was in the military and occasionally got to blow things up. The explosions are cool. I got to hear a lot of things blown up by other people at our training sites, especially, and overseas as well. And so it's just something that I have a affection for. As long as it's not me getting blown up.
Yeah, that sucks. Been there, done that. I won't recommend. 0 stars.
I've had artillery near miss, several bomb warnings that nothing happened. And in the civilian world, I've had somebody hunting shoot near me. And of course, any number of things like, car accidents, falling equipment, collapsing buildings. That's all. Boy, that was exciting. Let's not do that again.
Yep. Mostly a lot of boredom interspersed with that exciting. So, all right. So as we wrap this up, can you tell listeners how they can find you?
MichaelZWilliamson.com. I have an author page on Facebook. My personal page I must have the record on bans. I've got over 100 bans up to 90 days, usually for posting jokes that they found horribly offensive in some fashion. Frequently when I got the joke from somebody else on Facebook. Spam for linking to the BBC or Nature magazine. And there's somebody who has I have a hate club, which is, that's kind of a weird obsession for someone to have. I guess that goes back to the weird people, is the people who have devoted large chunks of their free time to reading every little bit of crap I post on Facebook in order to be offended by it. That's a pretty sad life. But I have an author page there. I have my michaelzwilliamson.com. My side business is at sharppointythings.com because I still like forging knives and retailing. And Bane's website, I've got a sub forum there, and it lists all my books. Well, most of my books.
Okay, so I will get that all in the show notes, and you can find us on the interwebs on our website. It's anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades, anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. You can follow us on Twitter at SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. Our email is blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can join us for the shenanigans over on Facebook, where it's facebook.com/Blasters and Blades podcast. And finally, you can support the show over with a Patreon type subscription at Blasters and Blades at the Anchor FM site, or buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. And be sure to put in the comments that it is for the podcast. And I will promise to keep Doc Cisca and Nick Garber duly intoxicated until their livers surrender.
Never surrender.
All right, bring us home, Doc.
Never give up. Never surrender. That was
Thank
the
you
best
for spending
Star
your
Trek
precious
movie ever.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. For the absentee Nick Garber, I'm Cisca. And with JR, he messed up the text. This was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week, same time, where we'll indulge our love of torturing JR, nerd culture, cheesy jokes, pineapple on pizza, and making JR learn math.
I was really going for you to say I'm J.R. Handley to see if I could get you to do it. I swapped it.
I got you.
All right. Goodbye, people.